Assalamu alaikum viewers. Welcome to lecture 22 of International Marketing subject. In today's lecture and in next few lectures, we'll be discussing a very important area in international marketing. That's the modes of entry into international markets. Now there's no one way in which firms or marketers can approach foreign markets to sell their products and services. So it's important that we understand these various options and we understand what it takes to succeed in these various options. There is rich diversity of methods or options that are available to firms and to managers to get engaged into foreign markets. We were well aware of exports, that the products are made in the home country and they are shipped or they are airlifted or sent over land to other foreign markets where they are sold, which is called exporting. Firms can also get engaged in foreign markets through licensing, to seeking rights to use technologies, trade names, patents, copyrights or other such intellectual assets. And for that they may pay royalties in terms of fees or percentage of sales or whatever has been decided. Franchising is another way which has rapidly expanded in last few decades, and we see many successful international franchising firms and concepts. So that's become a huge way to get engaged into foreign markets. Well, firms can also sell to foreign markets through counter trade, where perhaps they can exchange goods for goods or adopt such methods for seeking access to foreign markets. There are various other specialized modes of entry like turnkey projects, management contracts, which we'll be discussing while we are discussing this topic today and in next few lectures. Then firms can also get engaged in the foreign markets through their direct investment, through foreign direct investment in terms of establishing subsidiaries, joint ventures, or through portfolio investments. A passive investment into stock markets, into money markets, through loans, through bonds, etc. So there is a rich variety of options available to firms and to managers to engage in foreign markets. We have been hearing a lot about globalization of world markets, that scholars and researchers and writers have been saying repeatedly that the markets are globalizing, and for firms to succeed, for nations to succeed, they have to engage themselves into foreign markets. And we can see multinationals which are expanding around the world, investing around the world, having production facilities in many countries around the world, having marketing offices and their subsidiary offices in many countries around the world. So there was an expectation or a notion that globalization is rendering national boundaries or local economies irrelevant. In fact, opposite has really been happening. Researchers like Michael Porter, Paul Krugman, and even earlier researchers like Marshall in 1930s, they have been finding and emphasizing and arguing the importance of location in succeeding in international markets. Michael Porter, in his research in 80s on many countries, on many successful industries in various countries, he concluded that the successful industries of various countries are strongly clustered or concentrated into industrial districts or economic regions. And he further concluded that the competitive strengths, advantages that are needed for firms to succeed in competition, especially international competition, is not only created inside the firm, but is also essentially required from the surrounding environment of the firm, from the location itself. That's why Porter concludes that successful industries of any country which are successful internationally, which are selling internationally, from where the firms are competing internationally, are increasingly clustered, concentrated into regions within countries. So if we follow this stream of research and findings, then we conclude that for firms to succeed competition in international markets, a firm has to develop its internal capabilities, its internal strengths. But that's not sufficient. The firm has to locate also in a region from where it draws a lot of competitive advantages. So together, the advantages of location with the skills and capabilities of the firm, that the firm is able to compete in international markets. So it is important for success that the firm is located in a successful region, a cluster or an industrial district, or a hotspot, which various scholars have identified as. So location is important, is very important for success in international markets. Therefore, in the last 2 decades or so, we are seeing that numerous industrialized countries and developing countries have adopted cluster development initiatives, that they are investing to develop competencies and capabilities of their regions. That's where we are seeing success of regions like export processing zones, zones created to support export enterprises. And what is needed for success of those enterprises are infrastructure, facilities, and related and supporting industry to be brought together in close proximity. So if that is achieved in a region, only then the firms belonging to that region can successfully compete. Even in the recent phenomenal rise of Chinese industry, we can see the role of special economic zones. So the country created special zones where infrastructure was provided and all related and supporting industry was brought together, and firms were helped to specialize in their aspect of value chain, and hence the whole industry could now compete in international markets. That's where, even when the world is globalizing, bulk of the international business activity is through exports. And today, exports of goods and services exceed well above 10 trillion US dollars. Immense amount, and that's increasing. So globalization, as we understand and as we know now, is not rendering locations irrelevant, but is strengthening the locations. Countries are concentrating on developing the capabilities of their regions. So the firms from all over the world come to those regions. If the firms have to succeed in information technology and electronics, then they have to locate themselves in those regions where such skills, capabilities, and relating and supported industry is available. Maybe in Silicon Valley, in California, or for textiles in Faisalabad, for surgical and sports goods in Sialkot. Now, why do firms have to locate in Faisalabad if they have to be in weaving, in cotton fabric production? Or why it's important they have to be located in Sialkot if they are to be in surgical business, surgical exports, or they are in sports business, export of sporting product? Because there are a lot that is location specific. The location bring together the specialized partners together at what place. We can take example of Faisalabad's textile industry. In order to produce the final fabric, a number of stages of processing has to be taken from cotton to fabric. The cotton, after it has been collected and baled, that cotton then is taken to ginning factories and from ginning factories for sizing, for yarn making, and then for weaving and for finishing. All these stages of production have to be undertaken in order to manufacture final fabric that can be exported. Now, if we really see, in case of Faisalabad's industry, that tens of thousands of looms or small units which have installed our looms are weaving cotton fabric. But these looms need yarn, cotton yarn. Now that cotton yarn has to be sized, means starch have to be applied and processing has to be done before this yarn can be used for weaving. Now for a normal size, a viable size of a sizing unit, the production output will be so much that that unit can support 300, 400 or 500 weaving units. So economies of scales are very different. Again, for a processing mill, even a mid-sized processing mill, the production capacity is so much that few thousand weaving units are needed to support a mid-sized processing unit. So for the value chain, there has to be sizing facilities, there have to be weaving units, there have to be processing units for a final fabric to be produced for exports. Now in Faisalabad we can see there are few hundred sizing units supporting tens of thousands of looms, and then there are few hundred processing units, and then many exporters selling to the world market. Now for this value chain to be replicated at another location is impossible, because if few weavers go to another place, well then no sizing unit will be there, because a sizing unit to exist they need few hundred loom units. Again, there will be no processing unit, because for a processing unit to be viable, few thousand loom units have to be there. Now one cannot move so many at the same time. Hence industry just does not shift. So it becomes location specific. We call it untraded capability of a location. That this is the capability of location only, it cannot be traded. Well, weavers and their skills can be traded, money can be traded, it can move from one place to place. But how this value chain can move from this place to another place? It's just not possible. It's just not possible. And while this is happening, at the same time, the people who are doing sizing, they are developing their specialization, because they are gains in specializing. So they are becoming specialists in sizing. And they can afford to do that, because that's what they do all the time. Because they have many loom units in the proximity, and they can just concentrate on sizing and develop their skills, so they develop their specialization. So the weavers don't have to do their sizing, they just concentrate on weaving and they develop their specialization in weaving. And the processing mills don't have to weave fabric, because fabric is being woven in their vicinity, so they just specialize in processing. And while they specialize in processing, they enhance their skills, their efficiencies, their effectiveness. As a result, nobody can rival. If a loom unit is located at another location, or if a processing mill is located in another location in Pakistan or elsewhere, or a sizing unit is located elsewhere, or is there an integrated mill, cannot achieve the level of efficiencies, cost and productivity that can be achieved in location in Faisalabad for weaving cotton fabric. So I've given just this example to clarify how important a location becomes, economic region becomes. It's not easy to shift when in certain industries the related and supporting industry has to come together, has to specialize to achieve the best efficiencies and effectiveness according to world markets. Now, because of these phenomena, these realities, even when the markets are opening up, the world markets are globalizing, the countries are only increasingly exporting. Pakistan is exporting more surgical items, more sports goods, more rice, more cotton textiles, because the competence of manufacturing these things is an untraded thing. It is dependent as much on the capabilities of the firm, but it also additionally depends on the capabilities and competitive advantages of location, which are external to the firm. So it is critical now for the managers who are in firms or policy makers that they work to develop the export markets, that they are located at a location where by world standards best advantages for that type of industry are there, and from that location then they can export to the rest of the world markets. So exporting has been, remains, and will continue to remain one of the most viable options to access international market. It's just not viable to just move into international market and start to manufacture any product. The firm has to see whether the foreign market has a region, has a location, has a cluster, has an industry district where there are capabilities on the ground that other specialized related supporting industry manufacturers and suppliers are available, are existing, and relevant infrastructure is also there. If that does not happen, then a firm cannot efficiently and effectively manufacture in any foreign market. Chinese economic regions have been successful recently because they created these type of efficiencies in the location. So, and firms from world over are coming to those regions and shifting their production facilities there, because while they're locating on those locations, they can produce most effectively, most efficiently, and can export to the world. So the chemistry for success in today's time is to locate operations, the production operations, at a place which provides the best advantages, and from there export those products and services to other markets around the world. That is what globalization is really doing. So it is imperative, it's essential, it's important for policymakers and managers, if they are involved in international business, international marketing, that they master the aspect of export marketing. Now, export is also the simplest mode of internationalization. That's one of the key advantages of getting involved in the exports. Well, going to a foreign market, establishing an office there, establishing a production facility there is not only very costly, but also very complex. You have to know the market, you have to know its place, you have to recruit people there. So it's a lengthy process, a costly process, a complex process. It's far easier to produce products in your own market and then export these products to foreign countries for selling. So exporting is the simplest way of entering foreign markets. At the same time, it is the quickest way to enter foreign markets. It's more time consuming. It takes a lot of time to start to establish a production facility or office in every foreign market or any foreign market. It can be very quick for a firm, for a manager to produce wherever the firm is producing and export it to world market. So if a firm is manufacturing sports goods or surgical goods or textile products or rice in Pakistan, then the quickest way for them to enter foreign market is through exports. If they keep on producing the same item where they are producing, and they find distributors and buyers in foreign markets who are willing to pay at a profit for the product. So it is the simplest way to enter foreign markets. It is the quickest way to enter foreign markets. It often involves less financial exposure. By establishing an office, distribution system, production facilities in foreign countries often would involve a lot of investment. So if a firm is starting to enter foreign markets through exports, then that type of financial outlay exposure will not be needed. Accordingly, there will be less risk. If an investment is done, the risk will be higher. If less investment is needed through exports, then the risk will be lower. Entering foreign markets through export also has an advantage that it allows the firm to gradually enter the foreign markets. As we have been discussing in our previous lecture, there are a lot of uncertainties, lot of unknown things about foreign markets, which only through experience, only with time that firm and manager will learn. If a manager or firm starts to commit a lot of funds, money by directly investing in foreign markets, when the manager or firm does not know a lot about those foreign markets, lot that is unknown, does not have much experience about those markets, then the risks may be very high because of a lot of unknown things and inexperience in those markets. So as a first step, if firms and managers start to export, then they will start to learn about the foreign markets, learn about how the products are distributed, what it costs to distribute products, what it costs to advertise, what the laws, the regulation, environment, whether the product needs changes, whether it doesn't need changes, how is the consumer behavior in foreign markets. So exporting is a safe way, is a quick way to enter foreign markets. And through exporting, within a less risky way, we're requiring less investment, the managers and firms can learn a lot of things, can experience a lot of things about foreign markets. And once they have learned, they have experienced, now they are in a better position, better shape to commit more funds, to invest directly, to start production, or to start direct marketing in those foreign markets. So exporting allows a gradual process, a safe way to enter foreign markets. So there are a lot of advantages of exporting, but it's not without its trade-offs. One of the biggest trade-off or disadvantage of exporting is lack of control over marketing in foreign markets, especially for branded goods. In home country, firm is selling and having own marketing department, then they have a control over the way they manage their brands, how they position their products, how they position their brand. But if that is delegated to a foreign buyer, which is done in case of exports, that the foreign buyer is now controlling the marketing aspect of those products in his own market, then the manufacturing firm has little or no control over the marketing aspect. Now that can be problematic if for brand management and for proper positioning of products, because the foreign buyer may not have the capabilities or may not be willing to position or to market the brand in the way that is desired by the exporting firm, exporting managers. So one of the key drawbacks of exporting is lack of control over the marketing aspects of those products in foreign market. Another disadvantage of exporting is that exporter can quickly lose markets, as market can be quickly gained. That, well, you just have to start to export, you need to find a strong buyer, a strong distributor, and you are in the market very, very quickly. So market can be gained very quickly, but then the other side is it can be lost very quickly. If the importer in that country finds an alternative source, or the government of that country puts some barrier on importing that product or importing product from our country, then that export market can be quickly lost. So that risk is always there in case of exports. In case of many goods, the transportation cost may be very high. Most of our exports are to Western countries, to America, and to faraway countries like Japan. That's where most of our exports are going. These are faraway countries. A lot of cost involved in transporting goods from our country to their country. And for some type of goods, the transportation cost can be very, very high, especially where weight to price ratio is high. Raw materials and other bulky goods which are not very costly, for them to transport goods with big volume but not that costly, to transport them to faraway places can be very costly. So transportation cost can be very high compared with the production cost. And that goes against the exports. So those distances If the costs are very high and the price of products are not that high, then the transportation cost can really deter the export potential in those markets. So exporting is a very viable way to enter foreign markets. It's a quick and simple way, less risky way, is a gradual way, but at the same time it has this trade-off. The firm, the exporter, has less control over marketing, can gain market quickly, but can also lose market very, very quickly. Again, sending goods to faraway countries can be very costly, and that cost can increase the price of the goods and hence dampen the demand of those goods, or may put the exporter at a competitive disadvantage if there is a competing exporter from a nearby country of the importer or nearby place of the importer, and hence for that competitor to ship the goods to the importing country can be far less. So if you are exporting textiles to Europe, if there is a competitor which is in Europe or just close to Europe where the transportation costs are low, then inherently there will be a disadvantage because of high transportation costs. There are many forms of exporting. The firms can get involved into indirect exporting, that they sell to a local buyer and local buyer then exports. In many cases, firms from Pakistan are not directly exporting. Many textile producers, many sporting goods producers, many rice producers are not exporting themselves, but they sell to other firms, to other buyers in local markets who export to foreign destination. So this type of export is indirect exporting. Firms are also involved in direct exporting. We can see firms which are manufacturing and also involved in exports. Now exporting requires interacting with advanced countries, advanced markets, advanced competition, and to cope with exporting process, procedures, which we'll discuss in some detail in today's lecture later on, it requires some level of sophistication. But it also requires a dedication of time. For small firms, it may not be possible, where the entrepreneur requires to put all his attention or her attention towards his own production processes. He may not find time or may not afford to hire people who can manage the export documentation, export affairs. But in case of larger firms, we see that in our traditional industries, more of the larger firms are involved into exports because they can afford to establish their export department, export offices. They can cope with the requirement of export procedures and documentations and dealing with export intermediaries. A third way of exporting is to intra-corporate transfers. Now we are seeing increasingly internationalized companies, multinationals, big firms. Now these firms are having production operations and their subsidiaries in many countries. So these large internationalized or multinational firms may be producing in one country and sending it over to their subsidiaries, marketing subsidiaries in other countries which are selling in those markets. So this is different than selling to a buyer, which is another entity, another person, another firm, rather than sending over or exporting to a subsidiary, a sister organization. Because within firm, that sort of marketing is not required. Then transfer of pricing is taking place on different aspects. Because in case of exporting, the exporter is dealing with an outside entity, need to ensure proper transfer of title, has to go through proper procedure through banks in order for transaction to take place safely and securely and properly, and then the exporter has to ensure certain level of profitability also. But for intra-corporate transfer, when the same firm is buying from its subsidiary or affiliate from another country, then these type of procedure and processes can be simplified. There may be less of a profit motive, less of a risk in such transfers, such purchases, and hence less of a need to go through banks and other intermediaries. This also identifies one opportunity for international or multinational firms, that it involves costs and risks while transferring title and selling to firms overseas. If an exporter has to sell goods in a foreign country, but the buyer in a foreign country is a foreigner, a foreign firm, then for the safety of the transaction, the exporter will want to send the goods through proper documentation involving banks and other institutions which are going to charge their own fees, their own charges, may even delay the shipment of goods because of these procedures and processes. So the transaction cost itself will increase, and time for goods to arrive to their destination may also become longer. But if that transaction is taking place within the same firm between its affiliates and subsidiaries, then they do not need to involve banks and other agencies or organizations because no such risk is involved. And hence, their transaction can be far cheaper. So in many cases, it may be cheaper for internationalized firms or for multinational organizations to source goods from locations which have the best advantage in producing those goods and ship them to markets where they have their own affiliates to market those goods. In that case, transaction cost will be or can be far lower, and hence they can be in better competitive situation than only an exporter exporting to another buyer. That's where we see rise of internationalization, more multinational firms, because often they find themselves in a better advantage because of reduced transaction costs, because their buying and selling is taking place within the same firm, hence less of risk, hence less of transaction costs, and speedier transaction. Exports are also done through export management companies, the firms which cannot or do not want to have export personnel, export departments, because exporting itself often requires specialized skills. So in many countries and in many markets, even in our own country, there are firms which specialize in exports, because exports requires documentation, dealing with customs, with shipping, transportation bodies, and of course dealing with buyers in foreign countries, which requires level of competence, level of commitment, and level of expertise. So there are certain firms which specialize in these type of expertise. These are called export management firms, and manufacturers can outsource exporting through these firms. We also see exporting being done through enterprise networks. Sometime, in order for a complete product to be created, many manufacturers have to come together, or for having an efficient size for export, many producers have to come together. And we can see such corporations or cooperatives around the world. And we see such cooperatives even in Pakistan. In case of textile, many small manufacturers of garments join forces, form a network or a cluster, and hence together they develop efficiencies and more bargaining powers for purchase as well as for approaching customers in foreign markets. And we see in case of agriculture industry also many cooperatives that producers of a certain type of product, let's say oranges or certain type of fruit or vegetables, they come together because one producer may be small and may not impress a foreign buyer, or foreign buyers may want a more reliable supply source. Hence, many producers may join forces to create a more reliable source of their product, and hence the foreign buyers may feel more confident more to buy from this source regularly. Another intermediary which has played a very strong role in many countries are international trading companies. Since exporting and trading across borders itself is a very specialized activity, it requires a lot of capabilities to be learned, to be bring in those capabilities in the processes of trading across nations. This is an activity, like any production activity, also involves scale economies and scope economies. Larger firms which are dealing in many products may be able to deal or trade with these products more cheaply. The firms which are dealing in many complex technologies and they have a major business in that can afford to recruit specialists and experts who can then deal and trade in such products. So there's a level of specialization that is required. And many advanced countries their industries or their industrialization has taken place because of international trading companies or ITCs. Even when the British Empire came to our part of the world, the first from the British world came their trading companies, the East India Company. And then other major trading companies like Sime Darby and Jardine Matheson followed. And for exports and imports for the kingdom, these trading companies were very essential. Even if we examine the industrialization and development of industry in Japan, in South Korea, and Taiwan, and other countries in the region, we see a very prominent role of international trading companies in their countries. Well, manufacturers were concentrating on manufacturing products and goods and services. It was these trading companies, very, very large trading companies, which had opened their offices in many countries around the world, which were selling and marketing very effectively, efficiently local products into foreign markets. At the same time, these trading companies were able to source and bring needed raw materials and supplies for those manufacturers in their own countries very efficiently and effectively. So dual role these companies would play. So often in our country also, exporters need raw materials or inputs which are to be imported. So for exports, we need imports. Therefore, in our economy, as we see our exports rising, we also see our imports rising. One of the reasons is because of industrial consumption, because our export industries, as exports are growing, in need to import raw materials for consumption and producing and adding value for export products. So trading is needed. It is a skillful job. And the countries and the industries need to come together to create such successful companies, which are essentially needed to support export-oriented industry from the countries. Now, exporting involves much more than just producing products. It requires shipping products to foreign markets, and it requires to collect payments from foreign markets. But there is an issue here, that the buyers and sellers are very far away from each other. So seller or producer is in one country. Say, if exporting from Pakistan, then the producer is in Pakistan. And if it's exporting to Europe, then the buyer is somewhere in Europe, in a European country. So the distance is very far away. Not only that the distance is far, both are belonging to different countries, so different laws, different regulation, different environment. So it becomes very complex affair to send goods from here to a faraway foreign country. Now the buyer will find a lot of problem in making advance payments, because if the payment is done, then there is a lot of risk that the buyer may end up not getting the products, losing the payment, or getting substandard product. So buyer will be feeling a lot of risk in making payments upfront. But at the same time, exporter will find a lot of problems in exporting goods and expecting payments to come at a later period, because if there is no control, there is no guarantee, then the goods may be exported and the foreign buyer may not send the payment, or may not send the full payment. So there are a lot of risks involved. To resolve these risks, a lot of procedures, standard practices, standard institutions have been developed. So normal exporting procedure involve banks, shipping and transportation firms, and insurance companies. A standard export will involve buyer placing order through bank in buyer's own country. That bank will come and will guarantee the payment if exported goods are provided as required. Then that foreign bank may send that document to a local bank in our country. Hence, a local bank comes to guarantee the payment on behalf of the foreign bank if the goods are shipped according to the required documents. And then the exporter has to deal with the local bank. And hence, if the goods are produced properly and shipped properly for exports, then the local exporter will have a secure, guaranteed payment, because local bank has guaranteed on behalf of the foreign bank, and foreign bank will find it easy to guarantee that payment because the foreign bank and the foreign buyer are in the same country, and in many cases the foreign buyer may be client of that foreign bank. So banks come in, financial institutions of different countries come in. Even to regulate transaction between financial institutions of different countries, there is a multilateral agreement and multilateral agencies which ensures that if the commitment has been done between various financial institutions of different countries, then those commitments are fulfilled, to ensure smooth and risk-free, ideally risk-free transaction of goods. But then at the same time, the goods have to be shipped and transported through a standardized procedure, that the exporter hands over packaged full consignment to a established transporter, maybe shipping company or maybe airline company. Now those shipping companies and airline companies have to establish their international credibility. Once they take charge of those goods, they hand over a document which documents that so goods have been given in their control for shipment. Now these firms then transport these goods to the importer's destination. The exporter gets this document after handing over goods to the shipping or transport company, and then takes those documents to the local bank and can claim the payment. And the foreign buyer can be secure because the transportation company is a reliable company. Now that transportation company has the custody of the goods, and the goods will be delivered. If anything wrong happens, then the goods are insured also, so that in case of a damage during transportation for any reason, then the insurance can be claimed, and hence buyer and seller are further protected. So these standardized procedures, these institutions together come in to facilitate import and export transaction, and for these transactions to take place safely. So exporters or managers who want to get involved into exports need to know these procedures and these standard practices. Some of these more standard procedures and practices we will quickly identify in remaining part of today's lecture. The first aspect is that of transportation, the terms of shipment. Often in export orders we will see the word EXW when a price is being requested or the price is being quoted. So EXW means X works. That is, the exporter, the manufacturer, is quoting a price where the goods are packed but at the premises of the producer or exporter. In this case, the transportation of goods, the charges for transportation from manufacturer place to the shipping company, and shipment charges and insurance and duties or any other charges for loading and unloading until the goods reach the importer are to be borne by the buyer. If EXW is written in price, that means the manufacturer or the exporter is making the goods ready but not undertaking to transport these goods from his premises up to the exporters, the importer's required place. If FAS is written, that means free alongside ship. That means the exporter is committing to package the goods and also committing to pay local transportation and local unloading charges at the wharf, at the port or at the airport till the goods are lying alongside the ship or the airliner. Now, loading charges onto the airliner and freight charges and unloading charges or duties or any other charges are to be borne by the importer. If FOB is written, means freight on board, that means the exporter is committing to prepare the goods, to package them, to bear the cost of local transportation, if there is local export duty, local unloading and local loading on the ship. So then the freight charges and unloading charges and all other charges are to be borne by the importer. If term CFR is there, means cost and freight paid, then the exporter is committing to produce the goods, to package them. It is also committing to pay the price of local transportation to the port, unloading, wharfage, etc. at the port, loading charges onto the ship or aeroplane, and freight charges till the destination port of the importer. But the insurance charges or other charges are to be borne by the importer. The term CIF means cost, insurance and freight paid. That means the exporter is committing to produce the goods, to package them, is also going to undertake all the cost of local transportation, unloading and loading onto the airliner or ship, and shipment freight and the insurance cost involved in that shipment till the goods reach to the destination port. Term DDP means delivery duty paid, means that if there is a duty involved on the export port side or duty involved on import port side, all is borne by the exporter. That is, exporter includes in the price the cost of the goods and packaging, local transportation to the exporting port. Then if there is insurance involved, there is a freight involved, there is unloading charges at the port of disembarkation, there is wharfage, etc., or any fees, and if there is a duty involved at the importing country side, that duty has to be paid by the exporter, and then that is included in the price. So exporting requires to know these standard terms and standard practices. Other aspect which is involved in exporting is remittance of cash or payment terms. So if a cash with order, that means the importer is paying money at the time of placing orders. It's taking a lot of risk. So if cash with order, that means cash has been paid at the time of placing order to the exporter. But if banks are involved and it is confirmed irrevocable letter of credit, that means the importer has submitted the import documents to his local bank in his country, and the local bank has forwarded these documents with a guarantee that bank is going to pay if the goods are shipped accordingly, and those documents are then transferred to bank in the exporter's country. Then that bank in the exporter's country guarantees the payment to the exporter. So when the exporter ships the good, bring in those shipping documents and has to approach the local bank. When local bank confirms that the documents are appropriate, then local bank will pay to the exporter on behalf of the other bank in the importer's country. And when the goods are reached, or when the documents are reached, documents are delivered to the other bank, the importer's bank, then the importer's bank may ask the importer to pay the required payment. So two banks are here, banks in the importer country and bank in the exporter country, which come in to guarantee that payment. And if it is irrevocable letter of credit, that means it cannot be cancelled or changed once it has been issued within the time frame for which it is valid. But if it is unconfirmed irrevocable letter of credit, that means the importer has given documents to his bank, but his bank in that foreign country has directly sent those documents to the exporter. So no bank is involved in the exporter's country. Well, little bit of risk for exporting, but also reduces the costs. So when the exporter has done the exports, we'll send the documents to this foreign bank, hoping that that foreign bank will make the payment which it has guaranteed on behalf of the importer. If it is a revocable letter of credit, that means that order can be cancelled anytime. So the exporter has to see the terms of this export transaction. Then payment can be through side draft. That means if the shipment has been done and draft is presented to the importer, then importer will do the payment. If it's a time draft, that means it will be paid after certain time when the importer is presented with the draft document. If it is an open account, that means the payment will be done as mentioned on the invoice. If it is 30 days, 40 days, well, the payment will be made according to the invoice. But if it's on consignment basis, that means the payment will be done when the goods will be sold. Now, these are some of the standard practices and some other standard practices and procedures which exporters really need to know, because that affects their transaction cost, and those are essential requirements and procedures for exports. If they don't follow the required procedures, then there may be complications and the transaction may be delayed or may be stalled and may result into losses. We have seen in today's lecture that exporting is a simple, is a speedy and a very viable way to get access to international markets. Industrialized countries as well as developing countries put a lot of emphasis on exports. Exports also require countries to create economic regions, industry clusters, industry districts with specialization in certain type of products, because firms alone cannot compete in international scene. Firms require a lot of support from environment in which they are operating in form of proximity of specialized suppliers and other supporting and related manufacturers. Together, then, firms become capable and competent to compete in international markets. To facilitate transaction across borders, a lot of procedures and processes have been perfected and institutionalized over time that facilitate safe transaction, safe exchange of funds and goods when buyers are from different countries, from faraway regions. So it is very important for firms to understand, to know, to develop the level of expertise in exports. It's also essential for countries to facilitate exports out of their countries by firms. At the same time, to establish specialized firms, specialized institutions, support bodies which facilitate exporting, because exporting is becoming a more viable way, more preferred way of accessing foreign markets. Thank you for being with us today. Allah Hafiz.